Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. Brian, that's Rob. We have an awesome, amazing episode this week with a special guest, and Rob has been drinking before we start this little preamble, so buyer beware. Welcome to the Dirty Side, everybody. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm feeling very relaxed. Let's put it that way. Yes, it was my wife. I was going to say my wife is celebrating. I don't think she is. I think I'm celebrating with the fact that she's put up with me for 21 years. But yeah,
Not
there
bad.
may have been a little bit of alcohol flowing this weekend and probably quite a lot in the 3 hours prior to us recording, but it's all good. I'm here physically.
Well, happy anniversary to you guys. That is amazing. A little sound effect for you. But there, you know what? This was actually fascinating too. It was kind of a relatively quiet week as we record sort of the news and the social and videos before we get to our guest, which we recorded already. So why don't you kind of kick us off with some of the news that we saw this week?
Yeah, you're right. It was kind of slim pickings, I'm going to categorize it as this week. But actually, as I looked through the notes, we seem to have found quite a bit. So
Well, I mean, we do our best to
first,
make it
we
interesting.
we do, yeah. So we reported last week. Reported makes us sound like journalists. We mentioned last week.
Take her easy now.
We rambled on last week about how Wheatley was leaving Red Bull and was going over to be the team principal of Audi, and Horner had made like a throwaway comment about which a lot of people saw as being a bit disrespectful when people said like, "What's it like, Wheatley leaving?" Because he's been there since day one at Red Bull. I mean, he was like a founding father at that organization, has overseen a lot there. And Horner made some remark about, well, he's a high earner, so we'll be able to afford some multiple staff now that he's going. And I was like,
Really? I didn't catch that part. Is that what he
okay,
said?
yeah, he did. And it might have just been Horner tongue in cheek, and maybe some people reported it in an anti-Horner way. I don't know. I didn't see it firsthand, but what it does look like they're doing is they're looking to go down an avenue of promoting from within. They're not going to go and sort of spend mega bucks on bringing replacements for Newey or for Wheatley's. They're talking about how GP, Max's race engineer, may well get promoted internally, and they're going to do an internal reshuffle, which is great for him. But those two got a pretty cool relationship. So it'd be interesting to see what happens if he does take a higher role, because he's not going to be on the pit wall for Max anymore.
Could you imagine the person who has to step in as Max's engineer? I mean, when they got rid of Charles's engineers, Javi, when he was taken away, Charles was kind of like, no! But then at first we kind of, we realized we weren't going to be getting the whole question. And so at that point, it became the Brian Bozzi, I think his name is. Like, they established a relationship. But Max is by far the most difficult driver to manage from the pit wall. So that would be a tough one to take over. Like, yeah, I'm ready to be a race engineer. And like one race later, I'm ready to go back to doing whatever I was doing.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of the first bit that broke during the week, and then I saw quite a decent post, and I think you've corrected my date. Although I copied and pasted this, so I'm going to blame this on wherever I copied and pasted it from. But 2 week shutdown started on August the 5th,
Yeah.
and when they say 2 week shutdown, for people that don't know, they literally mean like 2 week shutdown. So the official statement is no F1 related activity can take place during the shutdown period. Factories must be closed for the entire 14-day period. F1 related activity is designated as being any operation or use of the wind tunnel CFD simulations and any production or development of car parts, testing parts, or tooling. In addition, no cars may be built or sub-assembled, and no design, development, or production work can take place. And this also applies to engine manufacturers, meaning powertrains cannot be tweaked at this point either. It's 2 weeks off. It's basically no work. You can't even think about making a car go faster. The only little kind of loophole in any of this is, from what I can read, is people are allowed to come in and hoover the factory and polish it to make it cleaner, because you can do maintenance work in the factory that they can't do while the hustle and bustle of F1 is going on. So when even this extends to some degree, a lot of people have seen all the admin accounts on social media have just kind of like just gone over the last week or so, because literally this is the 2 week vacation for F1. So unless you absolutely have to be doing something because somebody's going to die if you don't, they've gone. They've all just gone. And I think that's great, because these guys are being stretched to the limit now with 24 races, and 2 weeks must feel like an absolute eternity for them, to be honest.
Totally agree. And I'm happy for them, especially like we joked about a couple weeks ago. They keep elongating the calendar. Now they're adding more
Yep.
testing and just the things we're doing to the people who have to do the sport we love. let's take her easy a little bit. I will say, though, when I was in Paris about a month ago, I met somebody, I won't name his or her name, worked at Alpine, and they told me they had diabolical plans to work on the sub-assembly during this time period. I don't even know what a sub-assembly is, and now they can't do it. So Alpine will stay near the back of the grid because, darn it, the sub-assembly work cannot go on.
I mean, sub-assembly is my favorite of all the assemblies, but
Yeah, I'm more of a
yeah.
super assembly, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I got you. Uh, in
Look at
talking about
us
the
and
calendar,
our
what a
knowledge.
segue. Yeah, talking of the calendar, and what an awesome segue that
Thank
is.
you.
Formula One chiefs have scheduled talks with representatives of Rwanda next month as the African country bids to push forward with plans to host a Grand Prix. Um, I'm fine with this, with a little asterisk against that statement that at some point they're going to hit a snapping point where they can't just keep adding races. And I think we've talked about this in previous episodes where like there's going to be a point where a rotation is going to need to come
Mm-hmm.
in where out of a 24 race calendar, maybe 10 of them are iconic, legacy type races like Silverstone, Monaco, whatever else. And everything else is just going to have to go on you'll be on the calendar every other year or every third year or something because they can't just keep expanding and just go, yeah, come on, yeah, 52 races a year, one every week. I mean,
I agree. And we have talked about this, the idea of the rotation, right? Pick the ones that are always on, pick the ones that rotate and whatever the rotation schedule is, and try to get a little more geographically focused and obviously with commitments that they've made. So like Miami has certain times a year they have to do it given the Dolphins schedule. It's not as though they can just do an off week. The amount of time to run a GP takes longer than a week. So, it's hard with the Dolphins and so on and so forth. I'm with you 100%. I would love to see the expansion. It is fascinating, right? We have had some African talks, South Africa in particular. Kyle Army's been on the discussion, and then it was all corrupt, and now they're like trying to figure out what to do, and so we'll see kind of what happens, but it'll be fascinating. And from that, which seemed to be a real story, we move into the rumors. Oh, yeah, that's right. We fueled up the chopper. Go to the chopper. The rumors are that Mercedes Hamilton replacement has been decided, and the replacement is set, and the announcement is in the works that it'll be announced at Monza, and most people are saying it's Kimi Antonelli, which is obviously the leader in the clubhouse, which is why the dirty side predicted it'd be Antonelli in 25 at Mercedes. Rob, do you think it'll be Antonelli in 25 at Mercedes? And do you give credence to the fact that this has been decided and they're just now waiting to announce it, whether it's Monza or not?
well, that was so many questions packed
I
into one.
know.
So,
We'll take part B
so
first.
do I think it's going to happen and they've already done it and probably the ink has already dried on the paperwork? Yes, and they're just waiting to announce it. Yes, I do. Do I think it's right? No, no, I don't. And the reason I'm going to say no, I don't is that a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, but Toto didn't want to lose out on the next Max Verstappen. He wants the next kind of generational talent to be driving for Mercedes." Okay, great. Did Max rock up straight into a Red Bull and win the championship from a Red Bull? No, he didn't. He cut his teeth in a Toro Rosso for a while, got his elbows out, and was that kind of driver that we all saw his style right from the first season. That he was going to right. If there's a gap there, I'm going to take it. I don't care if I take you out on the way, and that's fine. But he cut his teeth and earned his stripes in a smaller team to start with, but without the spotlight of being in the main team. This to me feels like a huge risk because you are putting all your
Yes,
stock,
I
you are
agree.
putting, as much as no one wants to say this, you are putting your post Lewis Hamilton era on the shoulders of this lad because it's not George Russell. As much as I love George, this guy's being built up as the next big thing. So they bring him in. Even if they try and dress it up that George is number one and Kimi is number two, the media won't go along with that story. Kimi is going to get all the attention right from the beginning. And the moment he doesn't nail it, the moment he finishes fifth, sixth, seventh, or let's say beaten by Checo, is I don't know. This feels too much too soon for a kid that's not even been in F1 yet. They really should have tried to get him into Williams or someone else first and just get him 6 months, a year, cutting his teeth on the F1 rungs of the ladder before he goes straight into the Mercedes seat.
Totally agree. I couldn't even say it better. So I mean, I'm not going to even try. I totally agree. And I'd make a joke here that usually Williams is their feeder car, feeder team, right? It's not McLaren, it's not Aston Martin. It recently has been Williams, who obviously is an amazing team, amazing name, been an amazing team on the grid forever. Right now, a little down on their luck. On the way back up, we all think with James Vowles and now the drivers. So I guess what that means is maybe they put Valtteri in the seat in 25 at Mercedes, and then Williams fires either Carlos or Alex halfway through next year and puts Kimi in the seat for half a season and lets him try it out. And
who else has got Mercedes engine?
Just
who
kidding.
else? Weren't they
Aston
talking
Martin
about
and
Alpine?
McLaren.
But weren't they talking about Alpine ditching Renault and going to a Mercedes engine as well?
Right, and then McLaren was going to move on to Honda, if I remember. I'm getting it all wrong now.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking there must have been somewhere that Toto could have pulled some strings to say, I want to bring Kimi into F1. Yeah, but Williams is
this season, half a season. Antonelli Williams, half a year. I told you this was the wise move. I'm sorry, Logan. Goodbye. Antonelli, half a season. You know what you got. But
okay, you're right. But given that's not happening, the only other option would be 2025. Antonelli cuts his teeth in the current regulations and then moves to Mercedes as part of more of a clean slate where everyone's going to be learning from first principles because of the new regs. Then maybe that's not such a big jump for a Kimi, right? So you put him in a Mercedes-powered car for next year, but not the main ticket, and let him just learn the whole way the paddock is a little bit different.
But
in
if you
F1,
poop in the bed for an entire year, that makes the next year even harder for people to think you're the one. I'm just saying. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right. I hate to admit you're right, but you're probably right.
The other rumor that came around this week, which was actually talked about by a lot of people, Adrian Newey to Aston Martin. And this got a lot of traction early in the week. And we've had a lot of conversations with people. Oh, he's not looking for a house in Italy, says Jeremy Clarkson. He's out looking around wherever the hell Aston Martin, Enstone or whatever. But people are... I got that way wrong, but you know what I'm saying. That's this rumor we've heard, but this week it actually was printed in magazines, print magazines, the kind you put your hands on, turn pages.
It is. I do just want to take a little time out and say, anybody new to the Dirty Side, because we've had a lot of uptick on our Threads account and lots of people said they're going to check us out. Sound effect Brian just played was because that is the chopper reporting from live above the rumor mill. So if that sound effect didn't make sense... Without any context, that's what it was.
If that sound effect didn't make sense, welcome to Dirty Side. Not much does. Anyway, we talked about this a while ago, and we don't have to rehash the whole thing because it's not real yet. We can talk about it when it's real. But can I just say one more time that Lawrence Stroll wins Father of the Year if he recruits Adrian Newey to Aston Martin for Lance Stroll's car? I mean... He has not only built him a team, the analogy I used before was with my daughter. She dances. I haven't only built her a dance studio. I've hired her the best dance teachers. I've brought in the best dance theorists, judges from all over the world. If she ain't going to become the best dancer in the history of the F1 championship, then Lance Stroll ain't never going to do it ever again. So, he is dad of the year if this is true. I'm just saying.
That is true. Can you imagine, son, I bought you one of the most iconic names in motorsport in the world, purely because of James Bond, really. I've got you an Aston Martin, and you're going to learn off Fernando Alonso. And while you're soaking up his knowledge, what I've also done is I've got Adrian Newey to come in and actually, I've got you Q to come in and make you the most gadgets possible on your F1 car. Throw me a bone, son. Just win a race. Come on, what else can I do?
Can we get a couple more podiums out of you, please?
But no, do you know what? If I had that money...
Oh, I do too.
Would I be doing that for my kids? Damn straight.
Even if it wasn't my kid, it's my team, and I put my kid in it, and then I build both. If I had money, I would do that too. But anyway, if I also had money, I would improve my team, much as Williams has done. Rob, you want to hit this topic?
Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical on this one because I think we've heard this before. So I love James Vowles. I'm a big Williams fan. That's how I got into Formula One back in the day, and I would love to see Williams back at the front. But I don't like it sometimes where Williams make a little bit too much of their announcements before we've actually seen performance on track. So anyway, James Vowles has announced that a major upgrade will come to the FW46 car for the second half of the season. They will improve the car's capabilities around aerodynamics, suspension, and weight reduction. I'm like, I get why they have to throw this to the media. They need the eyeballs, they need the reporting, all this kind of stuff. But sometimes I kind of think it would be, yeah, we're working on some stuff. And then when they come out in the first race in Zandvoort and nail it, they can go, oh, yeah, that was all those
Right.
aerodynamics.
They can stand in
And
the pit lane with finger guns going bang, bang. Agreed. So the FW46, right? Every team has a different way of naming their cars, often with, a couple of initials and then a number. And usually the number is either the calendar year, how many versions of this car, how long they've been around. I think it's fascinating that Williams has decided to name it after the position on the grid they've finished most races this year. 46th. I mean, come on. Albon is great. Carlos must be watching from afar going, please be better, please be better, please be better.
Carlos has already got it kind of memorized that they're going to be increasing their aerodynamic suspension and weight reduction. He's all in on that, going, yeah, come on,
him
guys.
Making his pancakes. And then the last story that we have in the main section here before the video vault is that it's twofold. One, Liberty Media is the owner of the F1 group, and it has been placed in the center of an antitrust investigation initiated by the Department of Justice due to their F1's rejection of the Andretti Global team bid. And so here's the two-parter. The second part is CEO Greg Maffei confirmed in a conference call that the company owning F1 is being probed by the Justice Department Antitrust Division over the refusal of Andretti Global's thing. Before we get into our thoughts on this, the second part is they also announced on that same conference call a significant revenue increase in the second quarter of 24, up 20% from the previous year, $871 million versus $724 million in Q2. Which is fantastic. They talk about thriving season, increased race numbers and viewer engagement. They talk about an income rise, and this is what really matters. Like, revenue is nice and good, but if you don't make more money because of it, then you're not doing it right. 17% year-over-year income rise from 72 to 84 million. Fantastic. The problem is, and this is where we'll get into the analysis. We can go back to the antitrust or this, but I just want to say, they had 25% more races in the quarter because if you remember, there was no Emilia-Romagna last year because of the flooding, and there was no China last year because they were still dealing with COVID. Those came back in the second quarter. 25% more races, but only 20% more revenue. Okay, I do like the year-over-year increase in earnings. I love the number of eyeballs that are watching. There's a whole bunch of social media stats that are through the roof. The sport we love is thriving. But the way they cooked the books on this number, or at least the way they cooked the press release on this number, makes it sound through the roof. But yeah, I mean, if we did one podcast a month and then went to 4 podcasts a month and we had 4 times as many listens, we'd be like, yeah, I mean, But we could say 4 times as many listens. That's what they did. They raised the number of races and then counted more revenue because they had more races.
Okay. I'm loving all of your financial analysis there, but how did you thread the first part, the second part?
Same
so
conference call. The same quarterly earnings call. They talked about both.
Okay. No, got you. So let's
I'm
go
making
back
a
to the
finger
first part.
sandwich bridge situation.
Oh, I love that finger sandwich. That's fantastic. The
now
first part,
different.
That finger sandwich isn't as great. Just 2 fingers. But this antitrust thing, not growing up on this side of the pond and being exposed.
Burger.
It's a nothing burger, is it?
It is. 100%.
So because they felt compelled that they had to announce it as part of the earnings call, right? They had to say they were being investigated, but it's just it's just a paper exercise. There's nothing behind this, or
I mean, the number of times they find something for real and then actually do anything about it is very rare.
Because it got a lot of headlines like, Andretti bid under U.S. Department of Justice investigation, blah, 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 blah. And I looked at it, it caught my attention. I was like, I don't really know enough about this to have an opinion, so I'll wait for my resident American to...
It's sports. They're not going to care. I mean, it doesn't impact people's individual wallets. I mean, like this would be going after the rich getting richer, which they don't do. The government does not do that because they're the rich. Anyway, I could go on a high horse here and soapbox or whatever you want me to say for a long time. Trust me, it's a nothing burger. We can watch all this. If anything comes of this, I will get a tattoo on my lower back that says Dirty Side and run through the street with my shirt off.
Ooh, okay. Lock that one in.
Material.
And on that one,
material comes of this. Material. But with that, we're going to open the video vault.
Let's do it.
Now, fascinatingly, I was traveling this week. Rob was traveling this week, but somehow Rob F. Vale Incorporated, found time to lead us off with the first video in the vault this week. Rob, welcome to the vault.
Well, you see, the thing is, when you're spending time in an airport and your flight is delayed, then you find yourself on YouTube and you find a video. And I knew you were traveling, and I thought, you're not going to have anything or any time, I thought. So I was like, I'll just throw one thing in the vault. Oh my God, I nerded out on this. It's 10 minutes, and I've got to be honest, it's not the most dynamically presented video in the world, but for me, it was ridiculously interesting. So, it is the science behind onboard cameras. F1 TV Tech Talk, go.com, 10 minutes long. Craig Scarborough details how F1's iconic onboard camera shots work and how they've evolved over the years, and just basically talks you through every single camera they have on an F1 car, how it works, why it doesn't break, all these kind of things. It even talks about how they have their equivalent of windscreen wipers for cameras, so that if you've ever watched an onboard shot where you can see like all the crap has been thrown up by the circuit and you've got like the blurred onboard vision, then all of a sudden it seems to get clear. They explain how that works. Brilliant.
Love it.
Then they talk about the 360-degree camera that they're using, which they don't televise yet, but it's on all the cars, and it does give them some of the footage they use on social media afterwards.
Yeah.
Love it. I nerded out on this. It doesn't feel like 10 minutes. I'm going to say watch it.
Awesome. I haven't seen it yet. I will watch it based on that recommendation. And then I did have some time before I was on the road, and then even afterwards, and a listener submission, Dirty Cider submission. I'll get to that. But we have a meh sandwich. And I know how sandwiches work. For anyone who doesn't know, the Dirty Side is expert. We are experts on sandwiches. You don't name it after the bread. So the bread is good. The sandwich is meh. Here we go. The A to Z Challenge, Grill the Grid 2024, Episode 2, Formula One channel, 17 minutes. This is a longie, 17 minutes. Which driver has started more than 100 races by surname? And I loved it. I love these things. Like going back 3 years now when they did all the F1 champions in reverse, and Seb Vettel got all 71 or whatever the number was, and I just sat there glued to my TV as they grilled the grid is what I was trying to say. Loved it. This was also pretty good. So I'd start off with a good one here. However, quick note, we've given Checo a lot of grief. They did him dirty. There were a bunch of drivers who tied for fifth. I'm not going to name the number of points. I'm not going to say who else. But the way the page scrolled, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot of fives. And then they scroll the page, and Checo's on the next page, but he was one of the fives. Why was it Checo who had dropped to the next page as a 5 when there were 9 other 5s up at the top? I'm like, come on, bro, you did him dirty. Anyway, check that out. Then we get into the mat. Aston Martin Aramco F1 Team Campus Update Summer 2024 on obviously the Aston Martin Aramco F1 Team channel. 7 minutes. They're still working on the construction of the new joint. It was fun. I watched it. They pointed at a corner, said there'll be TVs over there. I said, time to turn off this version, and I moved on. This is one I did like, though, so not as much, but it's like the filling. It's like a club sandwich. This is the bacon. 2024 F1 moments you may have missed on the F1 channel. 14 minutes. It was okay. Again, not great, but I enjoyed it. It was almost like a meme review to some extent. So if you have time and you want to watch, it's not bad, but it ain't great. Back to the meh. I wanted to like this. F1 edition, Dude Perfect, 24 minutes. It was okay, but you kind of have to like Dude Perfect to watch this. Rob, have you ever seen a Dude Perfect video? No, I didn't think so.
No, I haven't, no.
So there was a point in my life where I was into Dude Perfect in all of the resultant videos. It's 5 guys who just basically shout into the microphone the whole time, awesome, bro! And like they just basically do stunts, and they drop basketballs from helicopters and try to get them in the net, and they do ridiculous things. They cut this up. It's from Melbourne, which is not recent. So I don't know how long they've been editing this thing or how long they have videos in the can. B, there's another channel just like them called How Ridiculous. I think it's called How Ridiculous. It's been about 4 or 5 years since I was into this stuff. They must be pissed because they're Aussies, and it was in Melbourne. And then C, if you really like these types of things, check it out. Otherwise, feel free to miss it. But the closer, the capper, the gold, is how Formula One tracks are painted. So you started with Scarbs and the cameras, and I'm closing with the painting. But I'm getting this
Wow.
from Dirty Cider Laura. She sent it to me. She goes, "Have you seen this?" I said, "No, this is epic. It is so good, Laura. Thank you for doing this." How Formula tracks are painted on the Matt Amy's channel, Amys, 6 minutes only. Go watch this. They're at the Belgian Grand Prix and they're painting Spa. And the amount of information I learned from watching them paint Spa, I started thinking to myself, oh my God, we should open up like an F1 paint company and just do it here in the States. We could be millionaires. But with that, we are closing the video vault this week.
Well, that was very abrupt. The closing of the video vault.
As always.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you introduce the guest because quite often, you give me credit for kind of like stalking people on social media and getting the guests on, but this one's all you, Brian.
Yeah.
You've been back and forth with this guest, kind of lining this up, and all I did was turn up and chat to them. So I just want to say thank you for lining this one up because it was brilliant.
Anytime.
But you go for it.
Fantasy Hub Rob. So at F1 Fantasy Hub Rob, fantasy has been something I've enjoyed my whole life. When we first started this here podcast, we started our fantasy challenges, and I looked around Twitter and I found a couple people doing fantasy information. Fantasy Hub Rob was by far the best, and he still is one of the best, and he's growing exponentially. I love this guy. He is so kind, so polite, so generous with his time. He's been on, this is his third time on. We will have him on hopefully more often. He went to Miami. He loves F1. He's a great guy, but he also loves fantasy, and he actually thinks about it in a way we don't even really think about our own pod. But he thinks about his own pod at Fantasy Fan Amp and the work he does with Fantasy HQ, and of course Terry from Coffee Corner. So it's great to have all three of those gentlemen on every so often. But Fantasy Hub Rob, you're the man. And here's our conversation with Rob. Now this is a few days ago, and I had some internet problems towards the end. I'll let you do that. I'll let you do that. You can make fun of me.
So Rob is going to take on the Who Wants to Be a Dirty Cider quiz, and he's got pride on the line. He needs to try to beat Adam and Terry. And I won't spoil if he does or if he doesn't. All I will say is, as he gets close to the crescendo, Brian's internet decided that it didn't want to play anymore. So you might hear a question that kind of goes a little bit something like this. But we do repeat the question. I've listened to it a couple of times. It only happens twice. And I think if you stick with it, you can work out what the question was because he asked me to repeat a question, thankfully. So I think you can enjoy this, and we'll all blame Brian, and he needs to pick up their internet.
Rob and Rob could hear each other perfectly. They had no idea I'm over here on an island hearing.
Yeah, Brian froze at one point. We could see that something was going wrong because Brian just like froze like some like ridiculous mime artist. But
we've been doing this 2+ years. I've never had an internet problem, and it happens when we have a guest on. I'm very sorry, Rob. Fantasy Hub Rob Vale. I don't care what you think, but to all the listeners, a very big apologies with those last couple questions. But check out our conversation with Fantasy Hub Rob.
Box.
All right, we are incredibly excited to have Rob, Fantasy Hub Rob, back with us. We were talking about this, it's been about a year since you were on last when we did a fantasy panel. A year before that, when we were both kind of getting started, when we had you on early to talk about fantasy. We've been longtime supporters of F1 Fantasy Hub. Rob is the man. He is having astronomical success with Fantasy Formula and his work with Adam at Fantasy HQ and Terry Coffee Corner. Rob, welcome back, man.
Ryan, Rob, it's so great to be back. I feel like we should just get an annual calendar invitation going for these meetings, given we've got a good cadence so far. But always a pleasure to join you. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, always a pleasure to have you here. And as I joked before, it's nice to have a Rob on the podcast that I actually want to talk to for a change. So, man, so first off, congratulations on all of the F1 fantasy success. You know, you go on to the F1 fantasy game through the main page, and Fantasy Formula is one of the pinned options, one of the main options, the featured options, and it's always one of the most popular, flagged, and trending. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. No, it's been an exciting last 12-18 months with the Fantasy Formula with Adam and Fan Amp. I definitely think, you know, it's the F1 fantasy game in itself is still in its infancy. I think all of the success we've all experienced so far, as little as it might be, is in no short form, and thankful for the community out there, because there's so many new and existing players that engage with us on Twitter, and the Dirty Side's one of those that is just so enthusiastic and eager for advice, and we're happy to provide it, even though it might be wrong sometimes. But notwithstanding that, it's been a pretty exciting last couple of years doing Twitter and YouTube, and then on the fantasy formula specifically, had the pleasure of speaking to Laura Winter, Chris McCarthy, Alex Brundle. So it's very exciting, and looking forward to kind of seeing where this goes in the future as well.
Well,
Yeah, it's been brilliant. I mean, watching kind of you guys kind of take off. I've got a quick question for you before we kind of get into the meat of it, and it's one that I think it's really impacted us as well. Last year was a real slog, really, trying to record race reviews each week, trying to make the race for second sound exciting. I also kind of lost interest in the fantasy towards the end because it was just the template, and you probably all just swap one driver each week because that's all you could afford to do to keep Max and Red Bull and everything else.
Yep.
So it's this year been an absolute blessing in the same way for you as it has for us.
Yeah, it has been. I think the races this season, fantasy aside, have been sensationally entertaining, and I think that extends to the fantasy game as well. I think last year F1 probably wasn't quite spot on with how the pricing for certain drivers and constructors were, and they've definitely got the recipe right in 2024. And I think that's, as a result, kind of dovetailed into much more variety in teams and many different strategies, none of which are the perfectly right answer week to week. So it's meant there's been a lot of robust discussion on Twitter, a lot of different questions and answers given in relation to how the team should be set up. And I think that's meant, as a result, the communities continue to grow, which I think is such a great sign for the game.
I mean, you guys have over 100,000 people in your game, if I saw the stats right. That's tremendous. So how are you doing personally in terms of your teams? Like, I recognize, you guys have a lot of pressure now to show yourselves as experts in the fantasy game. The good thing for Rob and I, we're just fans acting like fans. We have no pressure over here. We could just be bozos. Do you ever say to yourself, man, this is a tough decision this week. I don't want to look so bad.
Yeah, look, you're not wrong. I think it's perhaps ramped up a little more this season because of how varied the teams and the results are. And the first couple of weeks in particular, which are in some cases the most pivotal of the season because we just don't have a good read until, race 2 or 3 as to what the lay of the land is, can sometimes dictate how your team's looking. And I think after Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, I was looking at my team and my rank, and I was like, this is just not what I expected 2 races in, and turned it around a little bit. But Belgium, which we'll maybe get into in a little bit, was certainly a catalyst for me suffering after a couple of good weeks of building towards a good team and a good rank. So got 4 weeks to stew on Russell's disqualification, but I'm sure by the time we get to Zandvoort, it'll be at the back of my mind.
I had Russell and Joe and Mercedes, and so that last minute DQ that hit double. Rob, what did I have, like in the high 90s? It was some disaster of a week.
96, I think you had.
Yeah, he always rubs it in whenever I have a bad week. And when he has a good week, he'll often go like this. I checked out the fantasy formula. I got some tips from Rob. And so he'll rub it in that he went to get time from you guys listening in and getting tips, and then he goes sailing past me.
And that's the thing. It's definitely energized me this year. The variety of, there isn't just, right, everyone's going to pick this particular build. There's so many different builds at the moment that can all potentially give you a good score. And a lot of the time it's just down to lady luck or lady bad luck, like a Russell DQ that can kind of totally change things, which I love because it's brought the variety back. And that's sent me online. I've been on the Discord that you guys have got. I've been on consuming the YouTube videos because I'm trying to understand all the different options I've got, which is night and day to last year when it was like, no point changing my team this week then.
just leave the template in.
It was Red Bull and Aston Martin for 12 races in a row or something like that.
Yep.
And I think, as I mentioned just before, the pricing has contributed greatly to how teams and strategies are kind of mapped out week to week. So I think the game's in such a great spot. As you said, there's so much variety, and it just makes the content more interesting for me as well, recording about it and tweeting about it. it gets a lot more engagement because there are more questions rather than Red Bull, Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso. It's very much not rinse and repeat as it was 12 months prior.
But it is stressful too. I'll just say this: like I will often come down here with about 30 minutes before quali, and I have a little note card out, and I'll kind of like run through the options on the note card of who I want to put in or maybe not put in, and I'm trying to figure out the budget. And I'll use the tools calculator and other sites to kind of double check. But as I do this, I'm like it almost comes down to who I want in my team as opposed to who I think will do best, because it's hard to decipher sometimes. And I love that. I love the fact that you can choose. I will say this, though. I think I may have to get out of the Joe budget building aspect because he keeps burning me. Sauber's, these DNFs are racking up, man.
Yeah, I thankfully moved off Joe last week, but still got Logan Sargent. But it is a week to week decision on whether or not you run a top heavy team and a couple of rubbish back markers, or you kind of build a more balanced lineup. And I think there's such variety and definitely not a template or a meta lineup. Even though we've had different tracks and form changes in drivers and cars over the last few weeks. So aside from McLaren, there's no real standout constructor, and Mercedes weren't, for example, expected to do that well in Belgium, and up until the disqualification, we're on for a 1-2. So they've probably been a surprise package of me, not just in F1, but in fantasy as well.
Yeah, and I would say probably for the first time in a very long time, I can say I must have had multiple weeks this year when I haven't run Max, which is ridiculous. But quick question though about the structure of it. You say, the valuations and it's in a really good place this year. One thing, just one small tweak irks me, which is driver of the day and the amount of points it carries in the fan vote, where they just compile in and just like all the Lando fans come in and vote in driver of the day, even if he like DNFs. It's that one feels like maybe it should be changed next year.
Yeah, I've been a huge champion of having that removed entirely from the game, because I don't know of a single other sport in fantasy where you get points for players for man of the match. And it is such a significant amount. I think if it was 3 to 5 points, it maybe would be fine or maybe less scrutinized. But certainly with 10 points, which is worth more than or equal to a top 5 finish, it certainly decreases the value of having a driver in your team that's on for a top 8, like Nico Hulkenberg or someone kind of in that ilk. And the popular vote, the McLaren fanboys and fangirls certainly do have such an influence over fantasy, maybe without them realizing. So I do suspect that up until recently, which has probably been less of the case for Lando Norris, I still think it definitely needs to be reconsidered by the developers heading into next season, because it is becoming a little bit of an arbitrary, or a frustrating, maybe I should say, point scoring metric in the game.
Yeah, and just quickly, just so that we don't annoy all the McLaren fans and Lando fans out there, that's not to say that they're not well within their rights to all pile in and vote for him. It's just, I think there was one race where he either had a really bad sequence and ended up out, like way down in the points, and almost like for a consolation, all the fans rallied round him and went, "Don't worry, Lando, we'll get you driver of the day," which is a great sentiment, and it's fantastic he's got that big of a fan base. But you're looking at the driver of the day vote going, how was he at the top of that? It doesn't relate to what's going on track. So if fantasy is supposed to be something you can think about from like the results on track, then yeah, I'd like to kick driver of the day to touch on fantasy scoring.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I think strategy is a big component of fantasy, but I think luck very much outweighs that. And, I'll put my hand up and say I've had a lot of good weekends this season, but I've also had a lot of bad weekends as well. And most recently in Belgium is a sign of that. But I think you can only plan so much, but you can't predict DNFs, you can't predict disqualifications, right. and you can't predict to a certain extent the driver of the day. Or I mean, maybe you can with Lando, but it is certainly an outcome, or these are all outcomes that, no matter how much strategy and planning you put in, you just can't foresee.
Well, you talk about the luck and bad luck. I mean, the season has been very up and down. And I know Monaco, I had both Haas boys when they DNF'd in quali and the race. And then they crashed with Checo, but I had someone else that DNF'd. I mean, it was just a disaster. It was another week where I was in double-digit points. So as I try to rebound and as I try to make sure that my season ends strong, Is it okay, Rob, if we kind of talk quickly about the chips? Because some of them I don't really understand how they work, and I want to make sure I use them accurately. And we've had listeners kind of ask about it too. So the Final Fix, how do you apply the Final Fix chip appropriately? And Vale's over there smiling because he just did it, didn't you?
It didn't work out as planned, but I will let Rob explain it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a huge change in the chips for the game since the start of last year, where I think new developers came in and overhauled the scoring as well. And I think with 6 chips in the game, certainly for the newer players that are not as familiar, it's a lot to consume and understand in a short time frame. By the time the season starts, the Final Fix is probably one of the more nuanced ones because unlike the Limitless or the 3x DRS boost, which very much just maximizes your points week to week. The Final Fix is certainly one that you need to be a little bit more selective with using, and it, in its most basic form, is a chip that between qualifying and the race, you can make one change to your driver lineup, assuming you have enough money to afford the incoming driver when the outgoing driver is replaced. And some people in Belgium wanted to try and use it in a way that you could maybe get Oscar Piastri's points, have enough money on the side, and then bringing in Max Verstappen for his overtakes and positions gain. Was that the strategy you had in mind, Rob, or was?
Well, that's 100% what I did. And in hindsight, I just picked the wrong McLaren driver to swap out because I had Lando and Piastri. I was going to bank their qualifying points and then bring Max in. And part of me was saying, I know Lando's probably the better driver, but you're not allowed to change the 2 times when you play Final Fix. So if you swap, so Lando was my 2 times. If I'd have swapped him out with Final Fix, I would have got Max at 2 times. But I was like, I'm going to swap Piastri out. So I swapped Piastri out, brought Max in. Max got me a ton of points for all his overtakes. I didn't lose anything from qualifying because he didn't score any because of his grid penalty. So all was looking great until I looked at what I could have had if I'd have swapped Max in for Lando and got double Max points because Lando didn't really score a ton of points. So it was again, I picked it up with the Discord channel. It was a good little strategy. I would never have thought of it. Didn't quite give me as many points as I thought it was going to, but it was worth it.
I think it is one of those chips where you sometimes want to be a bit creative with how you use it because there's no right or wrong answer for how. I think the most obvious one would be if, say, in the very rare chance someone like Zhou or Logan Sargent or Kevin Magnussen qualified on pole, and I'm thinking K-Mag Brazil 2022, but where they'd qualify on pole and then lose a bunch of positions in the race because they're just nowhere near the fastest car on the grid. But I think the best scenario I could think of is if we rewind to Qatar of last season, where Carlos Sainz had that fuel issue between qualifying and the race, where I think it was between the sprint race and the Grand Prix, and didn't ultimately end up starting the race and got assigned the -20 did not start penalty. So I think with prior knowledge of whether or not he'd start the race, or if we saw a similar eventuality this season, you could use the Final Fix as more of an insurance policy against a driver like that. So that's kind of the approach I'm saving my Final Fix for. If I don't end up getting to a situation where a driver doesn't start the race, it's not the end of the world, because I do think the points upside on that chip is quite limited.
That's right there, Dirty Ziders. Amazing tip. I am also saving my Final Fix as an insurance policy now. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, it did work out for me banking. I mean, the premise worked, right? I got Oscar's qualification points. I got Max's driving through the field points. It just didn't quite work. One final little note on there on Final Fix is that what happens now is that Zandvoort, Max instantly drops back out again. And I get Piastri back, so the Final Fix doesn't last. It doesn't count as a transfer. So I don't have Max now. I will revert back to Oscar and Lando for Zandvoort.
I may have made a mistake. I didn't use the Limitless early on in the early sprints when we knew the Red Bull was better than the other teams, and it seemed like Max had that ability to win, and you could kind of bank on that in a sprint weekend, and everyone's like, oh, we use Limitless. I didn't, because I've said to myself, well, let's just see how the season unfolds, and now everyone's competing for wins, and there's no guarantees. And maybe it'll pay off for me at a sprint race later, but I guess we'll see.
I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world if you haven't used Limitless. I think a lot of people use it in China and Miami just because, as you say, Brian, the top teams and drivers were very clear cut at that point. But I fully expect there'll be a race. You know, I think sprints are typically the best times for that chip, where if it's Brazil, if it's Circuit of the Americas, if it's Qatar, we'll see a clear two or three drivers or teams emerge in practice or in practice in the sprint quali, and it probably would be a perfectly fine time to use it then. So I can't say you're in the wrong at all if you haven't yet used Limitless.
Man, I'm coming out of this feeling great.
I have used Limitless, but I'm still sitting on my 3 times, and for the same reason Brian just cited, I'm kind of like, I don't know when to play it now because it's really, really difficult to pick. One I'm not really that sure on, I kind of think I know how it works, but I'd like you to explain it, is the no negatives
Me
thing.
too. This is the last one I wanted to ask about. Same thing. It's all sitting there waiting. How do you do? What does it insure you against?
Yeah, so that's one that was changed this season actually from how it was structured 12 months ago, where usually it would be in 2023, if your driver, let's say, came out with negative points, it would just reset the driver's score back to 0. So let's say you had a good qualifying, let's call it Max Verstappen, he qualified first 10 points and DNS on the first turn, and that's a -20. So he finishes the weekend with -10. You would have your points reset back to 0. That was how it worked a year ago. This season, the no negative removes any negative scores, but keeps your positive scores. So let's say if we use that same example, Max gets his 10 qualifying points and then DNFs on the first turn. The -20 is cancelled out to 0, but he still keeps that 10 points. So it's I think better to use it on weekends where there are more sessions. So sprint weekends stand out to me in China because it was the first race for many drivers, and it was I think a wet sprint race that I was like, there's a lot of kind of unknown factors here. I'm just going to use it there. But you could also use it at a wet race in general, because I think, Brazil comes to mind. We got a sprint race there. There's sometimes a bit of rain there as well. So I think just because of the likelihood of more DNFs in more sessions, that's where I think the no negative comes into play. But you could also just use it as a wet weekend or at a street circuit where there's just a higher risk.
Yeah, so just so that I've understood that right. So it's not just between sessions, even in the race itself. If, I don't know, Max started the pit lane for some reason and overtook everybody in the entire race and got to first and then DNF, you get all of his overtake points, but you wouldn't get his DNF points.
Precisely.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Wow.
Yeah. And same goes for losing positions. Like if we go back to the Logan Sargent on pole example, as unlikely as that is, if he loses 20 positions, he keeps his points from qualifying, and the lost positions cancel out. So is not just for DNFs, just for all negative points.
Have you guys, but either of you guys seen the movie Analyze This with Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal? No?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. So then this is going to go over great. I feel like when Robert De Niro points at Billy Crystal, you like so appreciative.
Oh yeah, I love that.
So appreciative of the insight and the thought, and that's where I'm looking at Rob. I'm like, thank you. This is great info. This is awesome. So, if we could kind of talk about the season as a whole and the rest of the season from a fantasy perspective, and then the season as a whole, is there any last tips or fantasy tricks you want to tell people about for the rest of the year? Things you're watching? Are there drivers, or when do you abandon budget building? Like what are the things to think about for a player who wants to finish the season strong?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say for budget building specifically when the optimal time is to focus on scoring points, because everyone's at different budgets and at different ranks. So I think your strategy probably is dictated by that to some degree. I think the sprint races in the latter stages of the year will be particularly pivotal, just because I do think that's when, as you said, Brian, you've got a couple chips in play as to when you want to use them, timing them on weekends where those drivers you put them on do well, I think will be a huge factor in climbing up the ranks. And I think the other thing is probably just, I wouldn't even say it's a certain race, but targeting the reliable cars and drivers is so important, because DNFs can cripple your weeks in an instant. And, we've seen, Zhou, we've seen Logan Sargent, we've seen the Alpine guys at various points, have their races ruined, and people who own them have their fantasy scores ruined. So I'll be definitely targeting teams that just have a reliable and consistent kind of vein of form. And I think McLaren and Mercedes at the moment, to me, are the standouts in the top half of the grid. Even though I wouldn't say Mercedes typically has a race-winning car. They just seem to be consistent and there and thereabouts, regardless of kind of what Red Bull and McLaren bring to the track each week. I think Red Bull is just hard for how expensive they are to make them a week-to-week inclusion, but I do like the value McLaren offer at the moment, and Piastri, I think it's 23 million, to me stands out as bordering on must-own territory because he seems to have kind of climbed over the hump a little bit with those tire management concerns a few people have kind of highlighted. And I do think when you look at the likes of Lando Norris at 26, 27 million, Oscar's a much more price-friendly entry point for a bit of McLaren coverage. So I've got Oscar in my team, great result in Belgium, and I definitely think he's one to watch heading into the second half.
So, question on this, and this will be where maybe next year I need to up my game again. The one thing that, although I've thrown myself into it much more this year than last year, the one thing I've paid no attention to is what you two were just discussing is budget building. I have no idea what it is or how it works. My philosophy has been try and pick the best team each week to score me the most points because points is what puts you up the leaderboard. And if I pick good drivers that happen to do well, I guess their value goes up and I've probably got some more money to play with. That's as far as my budget. For everybody who doesn't know what budget building is, what should I have been doing all season?
I mean, the essence of any fantasy game is pick the players that score the most points. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, Rob, because if they score more points, they're going to go up in value. So I don't think that's like a bad strategy at all. It's quite a nuanced approach to budget building because a DNF is going to completely upend that strategy in an instant. And so I think targeting those value assets like the Haas drivers, Oscar Piastri, the Mercedes constructor, maybe even George Russell, they're all at kind of very friendly price entry points. And, you know, they're also very reliable drivers and constructors that don't have a checkered history of DNFs like a lot of the other teams in the midfield do. And I think they're all also, I think F1 Fantasy Tools cracked the code on how the pricing structure worked earlier in the season. And drivers and constructors are essentially grouped into three tiers, A, B, and C tier. A, you know, typically the higher performing drivers, the C tier, usually the midfield and back marker guys. So I do think you're probably a balance to strike between the B and the C tier guys because that's where more of the price value can be unlocked.
So is that why you sometimes see some drivers are only moving by 100,000 in a week and sometimes they're going by 1 million because you get bigger price increases in the lower tiers?
Yeah, that's correct. It's just it is you know, a higher price upside, but also because the lower tiers don't score as much, you need those banger race weeks from Valtteri or from Pierre Gasly to see that $1 million increase.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of myself. In the Dirty Side League, I'm only up to 116 million, but I'm in Michael Cronje's league, and I'm at 118.9. So 119 is not bad. It's not great, but I did an all right job. I have a little ways to go, but yeah, at some point.
And what are your total points between the two teams?
I'm doing better in Michael Cronje's league, significantly.
Okay. Significantly, okay.
Yeah, I'm not doing great in the Dirty Side League. I don't know why. I've had bad luck. Like I said, I move into George when the smart money's moving into Lewis. You know, kind of one of those situations.
Stop. If it's any consolation, I'm at 119 as well. I've had some rotten luck as well. So my rank, I think, around Monaco, Canada was about 3,000, and I'm now back down at 9,000 overall. So it's just been a pretty testing last few weeks, but hopefully a rebound in the second half can hopefully get me back inside the top 2,500.
I just want to get triple digits again, man. That's all I'm asking for.
No,
so with that, yeah, fingers crossed. With that, for the second part of the season and the season overall, what have been your favorite parts? Like, I mean, obviously, we've already touched on a little bit the parity and who can win and the fact that it's not all Max. That's obviously a big part of it. But, like, you're an Aussie. Like, are you, like, you talk about Oscar Piastri's value. Are you an Oscar Piastri fan above Danny Rick now? Like,
yeah, I think it's tough to see Ricciardo struggle. And the last few years, it's been quite well documented as to his fall from grace. But, you know, to see someone like Oscar come in to McLaren, set the world on fire there, his first win a couple of weeks ago, and you know, just deliver that consistency that, you know, an Australian representative on the grid has probably lacked for a few years is a great sign. So yeah, a Piastri fan through and through. I think my team will still always be Ferrari, but I do love Oscar, and wearing a bit of McLaren merch at the moment is my sign of, indicating how much of a supporter I am of him. So I'm really excited to see him continue in the second half of the year. I definitely think a second win for him and Lando is very, very likely, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see McLaren take out the constructors. I think the drivers is probably a little bit beyond reach, despite what the tabloids might be saying around whether or not Max will lose. But I do think the way Perez's form has gone means the McLaren it's the constructors to lose for them.
Totally
Yeah, you're
agree.
probably right. I think they're on a charge there. Just quickly on the Australian thing. Talk about making sure that you don't get your drivers stereotyped or typecast, because you couldn't pick two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? You got Danny Rick, larger than life, making the Recallan videos, and he's just
Mm.
absolute bundle of energy. Oscar Piastri, the quietest, most deadpan humor. I mean, the guy is funny, but in the total opposite way to Danny Rick. And I love them both equally, but Piastri is just, I don't know how, if I go to kind of my other sport, football, whenever you get a youngster breakthrough, sometimes it's not about the skill. They'll always talk about like an old head on young shoulders. They just seem to have it together and they're not getting carried away by things. Oscar seems wise beyond his years. It's very difficult sometimes to remember just how young he is, and I think he's doing an absolute phenomenal job at the moment. It's just, yeah, you must be very proud with the Aussies flying the flag at the moment.
Yeah, I am. He is. You're so right. Just an old head on young shoulders, and I think it's not something you see every day coming onto the grid in a rookie or a sophomore. So I think that's going to hold him in very good stead in the years to come. I'm not sure if it's the most agreed upon prediction right now, but I do think Oscar's a future world drivers champion, and I definitely think we could see it happen sooner rather than later. I'm not saying next year, but I definitely think within the next 3 to 5 years.
Wow. I mean, I'm in for it. I think that sounds great. I would love to see that happen. So
I agree. And
Go
no,
ahead.
sorry, go on, Brian.
No, I was going to say, I was going to ask about Miami, but if you want to continue with.
Oh yeah, okay. Let me just finish that point off. Is that McLaren are doing so well at the moment and are probably ahead of their plan. It will be interesting to see, to your point, let's just say they keep this form going. Let's just say 25, the grid is even closer than it is this year before the regs change, and McLaren are at the front, and both the drivers are obviously phenomenal talents. We could easily see Hamilton Rosberg season. If let's just humor me for a minute, and Red Bull just get caught even more. We could actually see those two going head to head like much more frequently. And right now, they're playing good teammates with each other. Well, kind of with the team instructions and stuff, but it'd be interesting to see what happens at that McLaren relationship when they're kind of both really at it, because I think there could be some sparks flying, and I don't know that there will be any team instructions given. I get the impression McLaren will let them race.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think the same. There was a couple of things around driver orders and number one driver heading into the break. I just don't see McLaren suddenly making it clear that Norris or Piastri is the lead driver on the team. So I think they'll let them race, and I think that's going to result in a lot of interesting outcomes and competitive drives from both of them. And I definitely expect, as you say, that's going to continue into next season as well. I think it'll be even closer. I wouldn't even be surprised if Max doesn't win it next year, just because of how close it has been this year. But again, we also know how much of a class performer Verstappen is. So it could be a situation much like we've got now, where he's in the second or third best car, but his consistency and high performance kind of shows through and means he's able to contend with the McLarens.
I can't remember the year. I want to say around 2010, 2011, something like that. But there was a season where 4 drivers went into the final day of the season, potentially being able to win it. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we look at 25. Max isn't going to completely fall off. 100% agree with you. Class act, he'll be in the mix. If both the McLaren drivers and the car stays on the trajectory that it is, you'd say both of them can be in the mix. And then you've got to pick, well, I'm not sure about Ferrari and Lewis, but let's just say the Mercedes keeps going and George keeps that up there, and plus whoever comes in alongside him. There's no reason to suggest that 25 can't be a season where we go into the last couple of races with multiple drivers still up for it. On the proviso that if this season was starting now after the break, we wouldn't have a clue, because there've been so many different drivers. Max is ahead because of that early. He made hay while the sun shone for the first 5-6 races where he built up his bank of points. And I don't think he'll get caught because he's good enough to stay ahead. But oh my gosh, next year could be a banger.
I can't wait. It's going to be good. Sap, do you have any kind of predictions on that?
I mean, I can't wait to see where the drivers settle. I also agree that the last handful of races have been, like we were kind of saying before, who's going to win? We don't know. And I love that. I love the fact that I think it'll continue. I think McLaren will get the constructors this year. I'm with you. I do not think Max will get caught this year, though, in the drivers.
I can't wait to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Because remember, like 2 years ago, whenever it
you
was,
said Red Bull was going to dominate all the way through the regs. Yep.
Until the regs changed, they wouldn't get caught. And I'm already wrong, but I can't wait to be 100% wrong by McLaren win the constructors this year.
As always, I told you it wouldn't be that runaway, and I said we'd have someone challenge Max. I said for sure the constructors, and I hoped the drivers. I could be right by next year. We'll see. You never know. So, Rob, you went to Miami, right? You were down at the Grand Prix in Miami, and you got a chance to check that out. Tell us about it, because I was very envious of you doing that.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. Went down with my girlfriend for the whole weekend, and it was truly probably heading into the weekend, the one I had in terms of a race and the facilities and amenities, the one I had the lowest expectations for, but it actually, I think for me personally, exceeded any of the Grand Prix I've been to in the United States.
Wow.
Between Vegas, Circuit of the Americas, and Miami. And I thought they've really done it quite well. They've had a couple of seasons under their belt to get to grips now with kind of how the lay of the land is at the track. And I think now that they've also got a permanent pit building and all of those other facilities backing onto Hard Rock Stadium means that it's a much tighter ship they're running. And it was just a great atmosphere. It was a really nice couple of days out there weather-wise. The racing was obviously sensational, and Lando had that win as well. So I think the energy was much higher. And I was just, super, super stoked to be down there. It was the first race in the US for the season too. So I had a great time and will definitely want to go back in future years.
What was your highlight? Like, what's the one thing you took away? Was it seeing Lando's first win, or was it like what was like you walked away thinking, boy, this was great because?
Yeah, it was 100% the race on the Sunday. I think it was super close, and for various points, I can't remember who it was up the front. Was it Max initially? I know Oscar was in the top 2, top 3 for a period of time as well, and Carlos Sainz and him, had a run in on track too. So I think it just made for a super competitive race. And I've always been of the view, for me personally, that if I want to watch a race from start to finish, I much prefer to watch it at home, because you have the commentary, you have the different camera angles, whereas at track you kind of only get that 1 or 2 turn view. But I thought, being right there on the pit straight and having a great vantage point of the cars coming around made for a super, super enjoyable experience. So would certainly recommend to anyone who's thinking about going to Miami.
That's awesome. We should, Vail, we got to get down there at some time.
Yeah, it's okay. Someone's going to sponsor us soon and pay for us to go to all the American tracks. It's going to happen anytime now, Brian.
Is it now? I'll be standing by the email inbox waiting.
Just keep hitting refresh. They'll be there soon.
No worries. So, Rob, as you look at we talked a little bit about the season and what's coming up next. We talked about your trip to Miami. Like, what's the one thing you're most excited for the next year and a half? Do you have plans to go to another race? Are you angling for a guest, on Fantasy Hub, Fantasy Formula? Like, what's kind of your thing you're looking forward to most over the next year or so?
There's, so many different races I wish I could say I could go to next. I think Interlagos is probably on the list for me at some point in the future. Maybe not this year, but I think going to Vegas last year was an incredible experience, and nothing is confirmed yet, but there is talks of maybe a Fantasy Formula live in-person recording at Las Vegas. So
wow.
Nothing's confirmed, and I don't want to be premature on that, but it would be great if Adam, Terry, and I were able to do a meetup, a recording right before qualifying.
Sorry, what did you say? Featuring the dirty side of the track? Is that what I heard you just say?
I mean, you guys would be welcome to join any day of the week. But yeah, that would be if it pulls through. We've talked about it a couple of times. Would be incredible. opportunity.
I remember
to
when
record
Brian
live.
and I went to Canada, we went with all these big grand ideas. We took all the equipment so that we could like plug our microphones into our phones so we could like interview people around the track and come away with all this amazing content. And we did none of that because we were just so gobsmacked by like, oh my gosh, we're in Canada. We forgot to do any of that.
We did none of
The
it.
world's worst content creators.
We didn't meet up with half the people we were going to meet up with. We met with some folks, but we were just so enthralled to be there. We just walked the track and checked out different grandstands and just met with random people, talked with them as we're walking along, fans of F1, and it was fun for us, just kind of like, for both of us, it was our first time at a race.
Yeah.
So it was fun to just kind of experience that. And speaking of first times and of the fantasy formula, you, Rob, are the last of the triumvirate to do the quiz. You haven't done this. It'll be your first time taking the quiz. Now, obviously, as I said, as your journey started, our journey started not too dissimilar a couple years ago, chatting, and you will always be an OG member of the Dirty Side Pod, the community. You are awesome. But where will you rank amongst the fantasy formula guys when it comes to the quiz? This is an objective score, and so we've explained a little bit of it before. I know we haven't run it a bunch, so you may not have heard it, but it's time for us to launch the Dirty Side Who Wants to Be a Dirty Sider quiz. And we even have, and we'll play some music once the questions start, but we don't have it live. So just imagine Vale puts a little bit of suspenseful music in the background as we do this. Are you ready, Rob, for Rob to quiz you?
I'm ready. I definitely think Terry and Adam have my measure in the quiz. There's a lot of wheel knowledge.
We're not having any excuses parked before we start. Come on, let's. I'm going to quickly run you through it. If you've ever seen Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it's very coincidentally exactly the same as that, but we didn't steal it at all. 15 questions, all multi-choice. First 5 are easy, next 5 a little bit harder. Final 5 have caught most people, or everybody out so far. You do have 3 lifelines to play, okay?
It's important.
So you have box, which means if you don't like a question, you're not changing your tires, you're changing the question. You hear it, you're like, I'm not sure. Play box, I'll just read you a different question out. You can play a 2-stop strategy, which is if you hear the question and you're torn between 2 answers, you can play your 2-stop strategy and you can take 2 bites at the cherry. So if you answer and you get it right, well, you wasted your lifeline. If you answer it and get it right, you get it. And then the last one that you can play on everything but the 15th question, should you get there, is if you don't like a question, you can activate DRS and accelerate right past it and skip the question altogether.
Sounds amazing. Can't wait.
I'll remind you as we go. Don't worry. Okay, Are you ready? The first
ready.
one's absolutely easy. No pressure. If you get it wrong, you're a muppet. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Question 1. What does Brian say at the start of every single episode of The Dirty Side of the Track? Is it, hello America, hey now, what's up y'all, nothing, because Rob does the intro?
I'll lock in the hey now.
Yeah.
Correct. See, easy peasy. Okay, question 2. The room that we see the drivers from the podium hang around in before they go to the podium is called A, the pre-podium emporium, B, Max's place, C, the podium pit stop, or D, the cool-down room.
I will go for the cool-down room, but the pre-podium emporium does sound like what they should rename it.
They should. Rob comes up with some good questions here. I got to give him credit. The quiz is his brainchild, and it's excellent. So good job, Rob.
Okay, thank you. Next question. VSC stands for what? Is it A, very short chicane, B, virtual safety car, C, volatile substance container, D, virtual space chariot?
Virtual safety car.
God, look at this, rocking on through. Question 4. What do they play for the winning driver? A, their favourite song, B, the F1 theme music, C, their national anthem, or D, the latest episode of The Dirty Side of the Track?
The national anthem, but I would love to hear the Dirty Side of the Track off the podium. This is great. There's a lot of room for improvement for Formula One, I'll say that.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
Okay, question 5, and the last of the gimmies. A red flag being waved means what? A, session suspended, B, driver approaching is angry, C, there is a Ferrari approaching you, D, a Taylor Swift album is playing.
Session suspended.
Look at that. Through the first 5. Okay, now they do actually start turning into kind of slight F1 knowledge. So, you've been eased in now. And you've got all 3 lifelines intact, which is good because it would have been shameful if you'd used any of them on those. But here we go. Who will partner Ocon next season? A. Gasly, B. K-Mag, C. Behrman, D. Bottas.
Ollie Behrman.
Yay, there we go. Look at this. Rocking on through.
Oh,
this
boy.
one.
He's going to catch you, I think, because I know we know you listen, but we know you don't listen to each one, and we appreciate you listening. This one's going to catch. You may have to DRS this. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. So we do drop one in, which is more about me and Brian each time. Question 7. Brian has favoured what snack recently, a part of his race day snacking? A. Cheetos. B. Pop-Tarts. C. Bacon. D. Pizza. Now you've got all 3 lifelines.
I will definitely use a lifeline on this one. Probably the acceleration one.
So you're just going to DRS and skip it, yeah?
I think so. I don't think I've listened to that.
It's only been the last couple races, so
it's only been the last couple of races, to be honest. Okay, so you've activated DRS and skipped that through to
the answer. By
the
answer was Cheetos.
Oh, okay.
Cheetos.
I would have said Pop-Tarts. So I got
breakfast
that wrong.
of champions, as anyone
Cheetos
knows.
for breakfast. I don't understand it, but
yeah. Well, when you're desperate, you grab what's available, and somehow we've had Cheetos.
Oh my gosh! Right. Question 8. To the summer break, how many different winners have we had so far this season? A3, B5, C7, D9.
You lock in 7, please.
Look at this. No hesitation. Okay, right. Question 9. 2 drivers have withdrawn from races so far this season, but we only have one who's had a DNS. Did not start. Was it A. Zhou, B. Gasly, C. Danny Rick, D. Leclerc?
To clarify, as in a DNS, they didn't start the race.
Correct. Yeah, we've had 2 WDs for withdrawn. So Sainz when he had his appendix, and Logan when he had his car stolen by Albon.
Oh, yep.
And we had 1 DNS so far in this first half.
Can you lock in Gasly at Silverstone, please?
Oh, look, even giving me the race. Look at this.
Look at
Okay.
The fantasy formula guys are nervous. Adam and Terry.
Question 10. Okay. Based on the sum total of their driver numbers, which team has the highest total? A. Red Bull, B. Sauber, C. Mercedes, D. Ferrari. We're not going to give you forever to work this one out.
No. It's not Red Bull and it's not Ferrari. And then 63 plus 44 is 107. And then, sorry, what was the 4th team?
Sauber.
Sauber is 77 plus. I think Valtteri is in the 60s, so I'm going to lock in Sauber.
Ooh, you're going
to lock in Sauber? It's 24. Oh, that's a mistake. Zhou is 24. Zhou is 24.
He still had his finger on the chess piece. I know. I say it's okay.
Sorry, Mercedes. Zhou is 24, so it would be Mercedes. Yes.
Okay. Well, apparently, we've just consulted with the judges, and they're going to give that one.
His finger was still on the piece.
Sorry.
It is correct. You're right. 107 for Mercedes to Sauber's 101. You're absolutely right. Nailed it with all the numbers. That would have caught me out because I know most of them, but Zhou's. I mean, 77 is tattooed on my brain for Valtteri, but I wouldn't have known Zhou, so I was... Okay. Question 11.
He still has, by the way, he still has box, and 2-stop strategy. Those are still available as lifelines, Rob, so don't forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If Max wins the driver's title this year, he will move to 4 titles. Who will he join on 4 titles? It's A. Senna and Prost, B. Fangio and Senna, C. Prost and Vettel, D. Senna and Vettel. And you got those 2 lifelines.
So, one of the Vettel options. Could you repeat the Vettel 2, please?
Yeah. Prost and Vettel or Senna and Vettel. If you really think it's down to those 2, you've got your 2-stop strategy to play as well.
I could be wrong here. I feel like Senna has 5, but my history. Sorry, was one of them to cancel out the other?
The 2-stop strategy allows you to answer twice. So if you are absolutely sure it's one of these 2, if you play it, you're going to get it. You're going to get through.
I'll play it on those 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to do 2-stop strategy. Who are you going to pick first? Which is the one you were leaning towards?
Vettel and Prost.
Vettel and Prost is the correct answer. You
Ah,
didn't need to use the
That's
lifeline.
all right. I wanted to be
But-
sure. I'm okay with that.
But by answering question 11 correctly and moving on to 12, you are ahead of Adam and you have Terry in your sights, okay?
Okay.
So, question 12. Who is the youngest ever F1 champion? A. Seb, B. Lewis, C. Fernando, D. Max.
Okay. Let's think. So Max won it. He was 22, 23, 24. I think it was 24. Lewis. Seb was younger than that, I'm pretty sure. Lewis was also younger than that, I'm pretty sure. What was the last?
Fernando was the other one. I mean,
Oh, it was
just to be brutally honest, these are the 4 youngest ever, so you are picking...
I'm leaning towards Lewis, but I'm not 100% certain because it was with McLaren in 2008 at Brazil. Is that right? No. I can't even. 2009. It was around then.
So the only... If you're not going to go for this, the only lifeline
Yeah.
you've got left is box, so we will swap you out for another question of a similar difficulty level, let's put it that way.
Maybe it's not Lewis. I'm not 100% certain, so let's swap out the question. I'd
Okay.
rather use all of my options than
that's okay.
obviously burn them. Yeah.
The answer was Seb. So when you were leading to Lewis,
Okay.
I was like, please don't lock in Lewis because you're gonna be wrong. Okay, right. Go back to where are we? Use one from recording yesterday, and you heard this podcast and told us about one of the biggest stories he ever broke as a journalist. What story was that? A. McLaren's extra brake pedal. B. Crashgate. C. The Red Bull cost cap breach. D. Schumacher joining Ferrari from Benetton.
Okay. I've only listened to this episode once, but I can't remember that part of the story. So it's very much a stab in the dark, as the last question would have been. Could you repeat the questions for me, Rob, if you don't mind?
Yeah, 100%. So Matt Bishop came on and told us about the biggest story that he broke when he was first a journalist. And was it McLaren's extra brake pedal, Crashgate, Red Bull cost cap breach, Schumacher joining Ferrari?
I feel like it. If Bishop was last year, it can't be the Ferrari one because that happened. I'm pretty sure Matt was on late last year or early this year, but I'm going to rule out Ferrari. I could be wrong, but I'm going to rule that one out. Red Bull cost cap. I'm going to focus on the newer ones more recently. I'm not sure if that was again. I could be wrong. So the other, I'm going to just whittle it down to the other two. So the brake pedal and what was the other one?
Crashgate.
That was with Briatore years ago, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's go for, this is again a 50-50. Let's go for the brake pedal.
Yeah! Congratulations.
Amazing.
Yes, it was. Wow. Okay. Yes, we are on to question 13. Yeah. Okay. Question 13. Who did Lewis overtake to clinch the world title in 2008? A. Nelson Piquet Jr. B. Heikki Kovalainen. C. Robert Kubica. D. Timo. I knew that was too easy when I was putting it in there.
Times.
Okay. Okay, yeah, if you watched it. Right, okay. So you've got 13 right, the same as Terry. You're going on to question 14. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Where are we? Right, okay. The highest number of wins held with different constructors, 5. Held by who? A. Fangio. B. Andrea De Cesaris. De Cesaris? Yeah, something like that.
Cesaris.
Yep. C. Chris Amon. Or D. Sterling Moss.
This was 5 constructors titles.
No, 5 wins with different constructors.
5
so they've
wins.
wins with different constructors.
Sorry,
so they've
5.
won a race for 5 different constructors. The highest number in Formula One history is
Got
5 wins with different constructors.
Got it.
Fangio, De Cesaris, Amon, or Moss.
Let's go for the great Sterling Moss.
Correct.
One more time.
Oh my gosh, here we go. No one's ever got this far. This is
Wow.
question 15, the final question. Which record did the 2010 season set? Was it the season with the most countries represented in a single season? Did it have the most world champions competing in a single season? Did it end up with the fewest points between first and second? Or was it the first time that no driver has ever won a back-to-back race in a single season?
That's a tough one. And
Good. It's the 15th question.
probably it is. Okay, I'm gonna again. I don't think I could be wrong again, but I feel like there are at least 2 consecutive races. Then there was the most drivers from the most countries represented, right? The most world champions on the grid, and
Fewest points between first and second.
fewest points between first and second in 2010, which Red Bull won, or which Vettel won. I'm gonna go for again a 1 in 4, but let's go for the most countries represented.
Play the music, Brian. Oh no! Oh,
That was
man,
amazing,
that was an amazing run. That was an amazing run. It was the most world champions competing in a single season. I think we had, because Schumacher was still there at Mercedes. We had Lewis, Fernando. I'd have to go. I didn't write them down. I should have done, but it was the most ever in a single season. It's
Wow.
why I knew that stat earlier on, with 2010 being the season where it went down to the wire. 4 drivers went into the final race that they could have won it. Yeah, it wasn't the fewest points. It was only like 1 or 2 points between them in the end. But actually, the lowest is like half a point. Nicky Lauda to somebody back in the day
Wow.
won by half a point in a season.
Wow.
So
Still happy with that run though.
Yeah, you
Oh,
should be.
wow. I
Rob,
mean,
that was
that puts you
amazing.
top of the leaderboard. You can crow over Terry and Adam all you like now, and they'll whinge about, oh, your questions are easier than ours or whatever it is. But it's only easy if you know the answer, as they say.
Amazing
So well
job.
done.
Thank you for
Amazing.
having
And
me
I'd
on.
like to apologize in advance for my internet, which started going bad at the last few questions. We heard it, but it was pixelated on this end, and that's where the recording is. So for the first time in a couple years, I've had internet problems right as Rob ran through the gauntlet and made it to 14 correct questions. So amazing job, Rob. That was
Thank
that was
you.
awesome. And thanks for coming on again. Thanks for being
course.
willing to hang out with us again. And I got to just say, like, we've said this, it's nice to see an amazing F1 community. And I'm really excited for you and the success you guys are having, that you're having, and people need to be following you for fantasy advice. But overall, it's just fun watching you guys, listen to the recordings and watching you guys talk about F1 and fantasy. So continued success, man. It's really fantastic.
I appreciate it. No, I it's so good to come back every year and speak to you guys. I know we converse a lot on Twitter as it is, but to jump on for a recording every 12 months, as I said, it's always really, really nice to chop it up with you guys, because it's such a pleasure, and also great to see, how sustained and consistent your podcasts are, because, the community of folks, the community of the Dirty Siders, we obviously love and appreciate everything you guys do too.
Awesome. Well,
Oh, you make us blush there, Rob, but it won't be another 12 months because it'll be live in Vegas. Come on, let's go.
we're just going to show up out of the blue and hang out with you guys. Rob, man, thanks again for making time to do this. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
So there we have it. Fantasy Hub Rob, despite deciding to give us all the excuses in the world before he took on the quiz,
He did. I
is
love
the
it.
new leader in the clubhouse. He's looked at Adam, he's looked at Terry and said, I see you guys, and I'm going to beat you. So despite Brian's internet problems,
Which really only
Fantasy Hub
impacted
Rob,
me.
which really only affected you plus
And
any
the
listener that
listeners.
wants to hear how he
Yeah,
got
yeah,
on
sorry,
in the quiz.
But live, it was just me.
Well done, Rob, because the way that you were kind of giving your excuses at the beginning, I really thought you were going to like cash out somewhere in like the question 6 or question 7, but you were the only person that's got to question 15 so far, and you didn't quite get it, but 14 puts you at the top of the leaderboard,
Awesome.
which has forced me to make a graphic now, so there will be a graphic out this week to put you at the top of the leaderboard. But A, brilliant to talk to you again, and B, congratulations on topping the leaderboard.
Definitely loved it. Rob, you want to give people a preview of next week? Because it is kind of a special getting ready for the second half Zandvoort situation.
Are we locked in for next week? I just wanted to double check because I haven't spoken to you about this. I've seen the WhatsApp flying back and forward. Is it our friend that we're
If the
coming on
WhatsApp
for?
is real, then yes, it
Okay,
is.
so if the WhatsApp is real, we will be getting the man, the legend, Pit Lane Paul will be joining us for a review of the first half of the season and giving us his views of the second half of the season. If the WhatsApps aren't real, then I have no idea what we're doing next week, and you can find out with us together as we work out what the hell we're doing next week.
Oh, it sounds great. I can't wait to have Pit Lane Paul on or not have Pit Lane Paul on, depending on how the WhatsApps trend. It is the off season. We're just having some fun. Hope you guys enjoyed the conversation with Rob. We can't wait to talk to y'all in a week's time with whatever we may be bringing you. Be well, be safe. Have a great rest of your summer. Take care, everybody. Found it. Took me a second. It's still live. I'm live. It's there. The music. The outro. I'm good with the buttons. Okay, this time, be well, everybody. See ya.